Rwanda there are two main ethnic groups, the Tutsi and the Hutus. However, why the Hutu and the Tutsis emerged as two distinct groups remain a mystery. Some believe they migrated to Rwanda at different times, but others think they just chose different occupations. Tutsis grazed cattle, whereas Hutus grew crops. Over time, the wealthy yet less numerous Tutsis took power over the Rwandan kingdom, and when the Germans colonized the area, they kept the Tutsi monarchy in power, and later the Belgians further disenfranchised the Hutus during their period of modernization. However, the Hutus managed to find high-ranking positions within the Catholic Church, and the Hutu clergy began calling for emancipation. Over time, they helped inspire and bring about a Hutu revolution in 1959, which ousted the Belgians and the monarchy. But now in power, the Hutus began killing Tutsis and forcing hundreds of thousands to leave the country to Zaire and Uganda. There, the Tutsis formed militias, and over the next couple decades, they led small, unsuccessful attacks into Rwanda. But in the 80s, many of the refugees who had fled to Uganda joined the Ugandan Bush War and helped Museveni secure power. They tried to get the Ugandans to start a war with Rwanda, but when this failed, Fred Rurigiemi formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front in 1990. With an experienced fighting force, the RPF invaded Rwanda from the north, starting the Rwandan Civil War. Rwanda at the time had been run by Juvenal Habyarimana for 17 years after he took power in a coup. He was quite a moderate leader, but a group of Hutu extremists like his wife Agatha had a great deal of influence. This small group of Hutu extremists, the Akuzu, began producing a great deal of anti-Tutsi propaganda. For instance, they called Hutus who married or did business with Tutsis traitors. During the war, Rurigiemi died and Paul Kagame became the head of the RPF, but their guerrilla tactics failed to make any significant gains. So after 2.5 years of fighting, France, the USA and the Organization of African Unity helped organize a ceasefire. The Arusha Accords were signed in August 1993, and this divided the government between the different parties. The RPF and the ruling party, the MRND, largely split power, but many Hutus were angered by this peace treaty. The government's Hutu Power radio station told their listeners how to deal with Tutsis, and many, like the youth wing of the MRND, the Interahamwe, became more militant. Plus, new groups like the Coalition for the Defense of the Republic also had a militant youth wing, the Impuzamugambi, who, like other militias, were receiving training from the Rwandan armed forces. And one wealthy Hutu businessman named Kabuga imported hundreds of thousands of machetes. But despite growing tensions, Habyarimana managed to keep the peace. But in April 1994, his plane was shot down, and nobody knows who did it, RPF soldiers or Hutu extremists. Either way, the next day the Prime Minister and her UN bodyguards were killed by soldiers within the Rwandan army, and the RPF had to stop Hutu militias from taking the government building. The Hutu extremist Bagosora took over as the interim leader, and with no moderate voices left within the government, the Akuzu were free to call for more violence. Radio hosts gave out information of members of the RPF and called for people with weapons to go out and find them. The Hutu militias and soldiers quickly began setting up roadblocks and indiscriminately killing Tutsis, and the UN forces that had been in Rwanda since the Arusha Accords had already been withdrawn, so there was nobody there to stop the Hutus. Kagame meanwhile warned if the killing did not stop, he would launch an invasion of Rwanda, but it didn't, so the RPF moved into the north from Uganda and advanced on Kigali. They were able to rescue some Tutsi who fled behind the front line, while the UN created humanitarian zones in the south. But within 100 days, between 500,000 and 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed, largely at the hands of organized militias and their machetes, and of course many more were raped and maimed.